The concept was innovative and potentially effective, using Alera's more refined integration to establish brief, distant connections that would mimic the signature Voss might be searching for, but lead him away from Haven's true location. It's worth considering, Kalen said thoughtfully, but we need to consult with Dr. Chun and the technical team. The implementation would need to be carefully controlled. They brought the proposal to Ramirez and Chun that afternoon, explaining Alera's insight and her willingness to help. The discussion that followed was thorough, with Chun raising both technical possibilities and medical concerns. The concept is sound, he acknowledged. Creating false signals to confuse Voss's detection methods could be effective, but it would require Alera to establish multiple connections in rapid succession, which could strain her even with the neural modifications in place. What if we augmented her abilities with Haven's communication array? Lyra suggested. Use our technology to amplify and direct her connections rather than having her bear the full neural load. The technical team expanded on this concept, developing a system that would allow Alera to establish the initial connection pattern, while Haven's specialized equipment would maintain and propagate the false signatures. The approach would minimize her direct neural involvement while maximizing the deceptive effect. It's our best option, Ramirez concluded after reviewing the detailed proposal. But I want to be absolutely clear, this is Alera's choice. If she shows any hesitation or concern, we find another way. The respect for Alera's agency, treating her decision as meaningful rather than merely obtaining a child's consent for an adult-determined course, reflected how far they had come in recognizing her unique position. Not a tool to be used, not simply a child to be protected, but a person with both extraordinary abilities and the right to determine how those abilities were employed. When presented with a refined plan, Alera considered it with characteristic thoroughness, asking detailed questions through her signs and carefully reviewing the technical specifications with a comprehension that continued to surprise even those who knew her best. Her decision, when it came, was clear and determined. She would help defend Haven, not because of obligation or pressure, but because this place and these people had become her home and family. The connection went both ways now. Just as they protected her, she would protect them. The operation was scheduled for the following morning, when the Omnicorp vessel would be at the point in its search pattern most susceptible to misdirection. The technical team worked through the night, preparing the specialized interface that would allow Alera to establish the deceptive connection patterns with minimal neural strain. Kalen remained with Alera and Lyra the night before the operation, the three of them sharing a quiet evening that deliberately avoided dwelling on the next day's challenges. Instead, they played simple games, reviewed Alera's recent educational projects, and maintained the comforting routines that had become their family pattern. As Lyra helped Alera prepare for bed, Kalen found himself standing at the viewport in their living quarters, watching the distant stars through the specialized shielding that prevented external detection. "She'll be all right," Lyra said softly, joining him after Alera had fallen asleep. "The system is designed to protect her, and she's stronger than we sometimes remember." "I know," Kalen acknowledged. "It's not just concern for her safety. It's—" He paused, searching for the right words. "It's that she shouldn't have to be this strong, this responsible at her age. No child should." Lyra leaned against him, her presence offering silent support. "In an ideal world, yes. But we live in this one. And in this one, she's extraordinary not just because of what was done to her, but because of who she's chosen to become despite it." The observation resonated deeply with Kalen. Alera's resilience wasn't merely passive endurance, but active transformation, taking the artificial integration that might have made her only a corporate tool and reshaping it into something that served her own values and connections. "She gets that from you," he said quietly. "That ability to adapt without surrendering what matters most." Lyra smiled slightly. "And from you, she gets the courage to face threats directly instead of only running from them." The shared acknowledgement of how they had both contributed to Alera's development, not genetically, but through example and care, deepened the sense of family that had formed around them. Morning came too quickly, the operation beginning with methodical precision as the technical team made final adjustments to the specialized interface. Alara approached the preparation process with a calm focus that belied her. Years, working cooperatively with Dr. Chun to establish the baseline parameters for the deceptive connections. The Omnicorp vessel has adjusted course again, Ramirez reported as they reached the final countdown. Still searching, but their pattern suggests increasing confidence in this general sector. Then we're implementing just in time, Chun observed, completing the interface calibration. Ready when you are, Alara. The child nodded solemnly, taking her position in the specially designed chair. Unlike previous integration setups, this one emphasized protective measures rather than maximum connection efficiency. Multiple neural buffers, real-time monitoring, and immediate disconnection protocols if strain exceeded safe thresholds. Lyra and Kalen remained nearby, their presence both supportive and supervisory. This was Alara's choice, but they were still her guardians, responsible for ensuring the operation remained within acceptable safety parameters. Establishing initial connection pattern, Chun announced as Alara activated the interface. Systems responding normally. Neural stress minimal. The plan involved creating 3 distinct false signatures at carefully calculated distances from Haven, each mimicking the unique energy pattern that Voss might be detecting through his own integration abilities, but positioned to lead the Omnicorp vessel away from the actual base location. First signature established, Chun confirmed, monitoring the technical readouts. Haven's amplification systems engaged. Alara, you can release the direct connection while we maintain the pattern. Alara nodded, carefully withdrawing from the first connection point while maintaining awareness of the overall system. The neural monitoring showed her stress levels rising slightly, but remaining well within the established safety thresholds. Omnicorp vessel responding, Ramirez reported, tracking the distant ship's movements. They've altered course to investigate the signature. Proceeding to second projection point. The process repeated twice more, each false signature positioned to create a credible search pattern that would lead the corporate vessel progressively further from Haven's actual location. Each connection required Alara's unique abilities to establish the authentic seeming energy pattern, but Haven's technology maintained the deception after the initial creation. Third signature established, Chun confirmed. All projected locations active and stable. Neural stress at 42% of maximum threshold, well within safe parameters. Omnicorp vessel has committed to the new search vector, Ramirez added with cautious satisfaction. They're moving away from Haven, following the trail we've created. The operation had succeeded, but Kalen's tactical instincts kept him from full relaxation. How long can we maintain the deception? Eventually they'll realize they're chasing ghosts. The signatures will degrade naturally over approximately 24 hours, Chun explained. By then, they should be far enough off course that standard search protocols would direct them to entirely different sectors. Unless Voss's abilities allow him to distinguish the deception, Lyra pointed out the concern they all shared. We've incorporated random variations and authentic energy fluctuations, Chun assured her. If his integration is anything like Alara's, the false signatures should be indistinguishable from genuine presence, just more distant and therefore more detectable than our carefully shielded base. Alara, still connected to the monitoring system but no longer actively establishing new projections, signed a question to Lyra. She's asking if she can track the ship's response. Lyra translated. Monitor how Voss interacts with the false signatures. Chun considered this, checking the neural stress readings. It should be safe, as long as she maintains observation only, no direct connection. It might actually provide valuable intelligence about how his integration abilities function. With careful guidance, Alara established a passive monitoring link, not connecting directly to Omnicorp systems, but observing the general technological patterns from a safe distance. Her expression became intensely focused, her hands occasionally making small movements as if sorting through invisible information. What's she seeing? Kalen asked after several minutes of this silent observation. Alara signed rapidly to Lyra, her movements conveying excitement and concern simultaneously. She says Voss is definitely there, definitely using integration to search, Lyra translated. But his connection is different, not like hers. More aggressive, less intuitive. He's pushing into systems rather than communicating with them. That aligns with what we suspected, Chen noted. His self-implemented integration would lack the organic development Ilera experienced. He's forcing the connection through technological means, rather than the symbiotic relationship her developing neural pathways established. Ilera signed again, more urgently. She says he's testing the signatures. Lyra translated, tension entering her voice, probing them more deeply than we anticipated. Can he trace them back to Haven? Kaelin asked sharply. Ilera shook her head decisively, signing a more detailed explanation. The signatures themselves are secure, Lyra explained, but she thinks he suspects they're not genuine. She says he's frustrated, angry. Disconnect the monitoring link, Chen decided immediately. If he's that actively engaged with the signatures, there's a small risk he could detect her observation. Ilera complied without hesitation, breaking the passive connection with the same careful control she'd demonstrated throughout the operation. The monitoring equipment showed her neural activity returning to normal baseline patterns, the stress indicators declining steadily. The deception is holding, Ramirez confirmed, still tracking the OmniCorp vessel's movements. They're continuing along the search vector established by the false signatures. Even if Voss suspects, he has no alternative trail to follow. The operation concluded with Ilera undergoing a thorough medical examination, confirming that the controlled use of her abilities had caused no lasting neural strain. She appeared tired but satisfied, her signs conveying both pride in her contribution and thoughtful analysis of what she had observed about Voss's integration methods. We should celebrate, Lyra suggested as they returned to their quarters that evening. A successful defense of our home deserves recognition. Kaelin agreed, having observed in his security role how a shared celebration strengthened community bonds and resilience. For Ilera, too, marking the success as something meaningful rather than merely necessary seemed important, a way of contextualizing her abilities as positive contributions rather than burdens. They organized a small gathering the following evening, inviting Ilera's closest friends from the Learning Center and the key technical personnel who had developed the specialized interface. The celebration was deliberately low-key, games, special food, and genuine appreciation for everyone's contributions rather than excessive focus on Ilera's unique role. As the evening progressed, Kaelin found himself in conversation with Commander Ramirez, both of them watching Ilera interact comfortably with her peers in a game that combined strategic thinking and physical activity. She's remarkable, Ramirez observed quietly. Not just her abilities, but how she's adapted to them, how she's integrated them into a genuine childhood despite everything. She's had help, Kaelin acknowledged. This community has embraced her as a child first, an asset second. That's made all the difference. Ramirez nodded thoughtfully. I've been in this fight against corporate domination for most of my adult life. Sometimes the big victories, disrupting the Nexus network, establishing Haven, feel abstract. But watching her, she gestured toward Ilera, currently laughing silently at something her friend Talia had said. That's what we're really fighting for. The chance for children to be children, not corporate resources. The observation resonated with Kaelin's own journey, from corporate enforcer to independent salvager to protector of a family and community he had never expected to find. The abstract principles of freedom and autonomy had become concrete in the form of a child with extraordinary abilities and an ordinary desire for security, connection, and joy. The OmniCorp vessel eventually departed the sector, following the false trail to its conclusion before apparently abandoning that search vector. Haven's monitoring systems tracked its departure with cautious relief, though security remained heightened in case of return with reinforcements or more sophisticated detection methods. Life gradually returned to its established rhythms, but with a subtle shift in the community's perception of Ilera. Her role in protecting Haven had earned her a different kind of respect. Not awe at her abilities, which would have set her apart, but appreciation for her willingness to contribute those abilities to the community's defense. She was increasingly seen not as a special case requiring protection, but as a valued member with unique contributions to make. This evolving perception matched Illyra's own development. The months at Haven had allowed her to grow beyond the identity of fugitive or asset into something more complex and self-determined. Her integration abilities remained part of who she was, but they no longer defined her entire existence. She asked about formal education today. Lyra mentioned to Kaylin one evening, several weeks after the OmniCorp incident. Specifically, whether she could train in technical systems design when she's older. Not surprising, Kaylin observed. She has a natural affinity for understanding how systems work, even beyond her integration abilities. Yes, but it's the first time she's really thought about her future in concrete terms, Lyra explained, her expression reflective. Not just surviving, not just staying hidden, but building something, becoming someone specific. The milestone struck them both as significant, evidence that Illyra was developing the sense of future possibility that had been denied her during their desperate flight across the sector. She was imagining herself not just as a fugitive or a weapon or even a child under protection, but as a person with evolving interests and aspirations. "We should support that," Kaylin said decisively. "Help her explore whatever directions interest her, technical or otherwise." The conversation turned to practical considerations, educational resources available at Haven, potential mentors in various fields, the balance between specialized training and broad development appropriate for a child her age. In the midst of these ordinary parental discussions, Kaylin was struck by how far they had come from the moment Lyra had placed Illyra's hand in his on that derelict ship, changing the trajectory of all their lives. The following months brought both challenges and progress. OmniCorp's activities suggested they had not abandoned their interest in Illyra, though their search patterns indicated uncertainty about her location. Intelligence gathered by the Alliance's network reported that the Nexus network had been partially implemented with the alternative access protocols, but it significantly reduced capability and effectiveness compared to the original design. Voss's whereabouts remained a concerning variable. He continued to serve as a special advisor to OmniCorp's security division, his integration abilities apparently valued despite their limitation compared to what Illyra could provide. Occasional reports suggested he was continuing his own research, potentially refining his self-implemented integration to enhance its capabilities. Within Haven, life developed a stability that allowed for longer-term planning and development. Lyra's research project progressed from theoretical modeling to practical applications, creating modified integration technologies that might eventually provide enhanced communication capabilities for deep space missions without the invasive neural requirements of OmniCorp's original design. Kaylin's role in Haven security operations expanded to include training new personnel and developing improved defensive strategies based on his corporate experience. The position provided both professional fulfillment and the flexibility to maintain his central role in Illyra's life, a balance that had once seemed impossible during his years as a corporate operative or isolated salvageur. Illyra herself continued to thrive, her education encompassing both standard curriculum and specialized training that acknowledged her unique abilities. Her communication expanded to include more frequent spoken language, though she still preferred sign for complex or nuanced expression. Her circle of friends grew, the initial wariness other children had shown giving way to genuine acceptance as they came to know her as simply Illyra, not the child with mysterious abilities. 1 year after their arrival at Haven, the small family celebrated with a quiet commemoration of how far they had come. They shared a special meal in their quarters, reminiscing about the journey that had brought them together and acknowledging the challenges they had overcome. "Do you remember when we first met?" Kaylin asked Illyra, curious about her perspective on those fraught moments aboard the derelict ship. Illyra nodded, her hands moving in the flowing signs that had become familiar to both adults. She says she was scared but also relieved, Lyra translated, watching her daughter's expressions as carefully as her hands. "Because you look strong but not cruel." and you were surprised to see her, which meant you weren't expecting her, weren't hunting her. The insight into Alara's initial assessment surprised Kalen, the child's perceptiveness evident even in that moment of crisis. "What about now?" he asked, genuinely curious about how she perceived their family unit after a year of shared life. Alara considered the question seriously, then signed a response that Lyra translated with evident emotion. She says, "Now we're a constellation. 3 stars that make a pattern together. Different but connected." The metaphor struck Kalen with its beautiful simplicity and depth. The recognition of their individual identities combined with their fundamental connection, creating something meaningful through their relationship, rather than losing themselves within it. "I like that," he said simply, reaching to take both Alara's small hand and Lyra's in his own. A constellation, as they sat together, connected in that moment of quiet acknowledgement. Kalen reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this point. From a chance reunion on a derelict ship to a family celebrating a year of shared life. From desperate fugitives to members of a community working toward a more balanced future. The path ahead remained uncertain. Omnicorp's reach extended throughout the system, their resources vastly outmatching the Alliance's. Voss's unpredictable abilities and personal vendetta presented an ongoing threat. The neural integration that made Alara unique would always attract those who saw its potential for exploitation rather than its place within a child deserving of normal development. Yet in this moment, surrounded by the constellation they had formed, those challenges seemed manageable rather than overwhelming. They had found something worth protecting, not just Alara's abilities or even Alara herself, but the family they had become, the community they had joined, the future they were helping to build. The simple words Alara had signed during their desperate flight echoed in Kalen's mind. No longer just a hope but a reality they renewed each day, together. In the quiet of their celebration, with the stars visible through Haven's shielded viewport and the subtle hum of the community's system surrounding them, that promise felt both profound and achievable. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as they had faced all others since that fateful moment when Lyra had handed him the child with the words that had changed everything. "You saved me years ago and left me with this." What had begun as an accusation had transformed into the foundation of a family. What had seemed a burden had become their greatest gift. And what had started as a desperate flight had become a journey home. Not to a place, but to each other. As Alara drifted to sleep that night, secure in the knowledge of being both protected and valued, Kalen and Lyra stood together at the viewport, watching the distant stars that had once represented only navigation points during their escape, but now symbolized possibilities. "Do you ever regret it?" Lyra asked quietly. "Being pulled into our chaos? The life you had to leave behind?" Kalen considered the question honestly, remembering the solitary existence he had crafted after leaving Omnicorp, the carefully maintained isolation that had seemed like freedom until he discovered what true connection could offer. "No," he said with certainty. "That wasn't really living. It was just surviving." He gestured to encompass their quarters, the sleeping child, the two of them standing together. "This is living." Lyra's hand found his, their fingers intertwining in the comfortable gesture that had developed over months of shared experiences. "A constellation," she said softly, echoing Alara's metaphor. "A constellation," Kalen agreed, looking not at the distant stars but at the home they had created among them. Outside their viewport, the asteroid field that concealed Haven continued its slow orbital dance around the distant sun. Within the hidden base, the community pursued its mission of creating alternatives to corporate dominance. And within their quarters, a family born of crisis and choice rested in the hard-won peace they had forged together. The challenges would continue. The struggle against Omnicorp's expanding control, the vigilance against Voss's unpredictable threats, the ongoing work of helping Alara navigate her unique abilities within an ordinary childhood. None of these had simple resolutions. But they no longer faced these challenges alone or unprepared. They had found strength in their constellation, in the community that supported them, in the future they were helping to build. Whatever came next, They would meet it together, not just surviving, but truly living. And for now, in the quiet of their anniversary night, that was enough. "It's funny," Lyra said after a comfortable silence, her voice thoughtful. "When I found you on that ship, I thought I was just finding protection, a way to keep running. And instead," she smiled, the expression visible in profile against the starlight. "Instead, we stopped running. We found a home, a family, a future." Kalen nodded, understanding the journey from desperate flight to purposeful stand, not just for Alara's safety, but for the principles and connections that made that safety meaningful. From survival to living, he summarized the distinction that had become central to his own transformation. They returned to comfortable silence, watching the stars and the subtle movements of the asteroid field beyond the viewport. Behind them, Alara slept peacefully, her dreams untroubled by pursuit or fear. Around them, Haven continued its quiet operations, a community of purpose and resistance against corporate control. The constellation they had formed, unexpected, resilient, transformative, had become their most powerful defense. And their greatest gift, whatever threats emerged, whatever challenges arose, they would face them together, their connection stronger than any force that sought to break it. In the end, it was that simple and that profound. Together, Alara, perhaps most remarkably, began the challenging but rewarding process of integration into something resembling normal childhood. The Learning Center welcomed her, adapting to her unique communication style and abilities with the flexibility that came from educating a diverse group of children with varied backgrounds and needs. Her connection to technology remained, but in Haven's carefully designed environment, it became less intrusive, less demanding. The systems recognized her rather than attempting to extract from her, a subtle but profound difference that allowed her to experience her abilities as a natural extension of herself rather than a burden or tool for others to exploit. 2 weeks after their arrival, Kalen found Alara sitting alone in one of Haven's observation domes, watching the slow dance of asteroids through the reinforced view screen. He had been looking for her after she hadn't appeared for dinner, a small but unusual deviation from the routine she had embraced since their arrival. "There you are," he said, keeping his tone casual as he sat beside her on the observation bench. "Lyra was wondering where you'd gone." Alara signed a brief apology, her movements fluid with growing confidence. "No need to be sorry," Kalen assured her. "Sometimes we all need quiet moments." He followed her gaze to the asteroid field. "Pretty amazing view, isn't it?" Alara nodded, then signed a more complex series of gestures. Kalen hesitated, still learning her sign language. "I didn't catch all that. Something about the asteroids." She repeated the signs more slowly, adding a few simpler ones he recognized. "You like watching them because they move according to their own rules," he ventured, interpreting as best he could. Alara smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that still appeared too rarely on her solemn face, and nodded. She made another sign, pointing first to herself, then to the asteroids. "Like you," Kalen translated, understanding dawning. "You feel a connection to them because they follow their own path." The child nodded again, pleased at being understood. Then her expression grew more thoughtful, and she began a new series of signs, more elaborate and nuanced. Kalen watched carefully, recognizing fragments but missing the overall meaning. "I think we need Lyra for this one," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "I'm still learning." But Alara shook her head, determined to communicate directly with him. She tried again, simplifying her signs, adding gestures they had developed between themselves over the weeks. "You're asking if we'll stay here," Kalen guessed, piecing together her meaning. "If Haven is our home now," Alara nodded, her expression serious, waiting for his answer. The question struck Kalen deeply. Throughout their desperate flight across the sector, he had focused entirely on the immediate goal of keeping Alara safe, of reaching the resistance. Now that they had accomplished that objective, the longer-term questions loomed. Questions about permanence, about roots, about the kind of life they might build here. "I think it could be," he said finally, answering with the honesty she deserved. "Haven is safer than anywhere we've been. You can learn here, grow here. Lyra can continue her research. He paused, considering his own place in this potential future. And I can help protect all of this. So yes, I believe this can be our home, if that's what you want. Alara considered his answer, then signed a single word, a question that carried more weight than its simplicity might suggest. Forever. Kalen translated, understanding the child's need for certainty after so much upheaval. He could have offered platitudes, easy reassurances that no adult should give a child about forever. But Alara had endured too much to be patronized with comfortable lies. I can't promise forever, he said gently. No one can, but I can promise that as long as I'm able, I'll be here, with you and Lyra. Together. Alara studied his face with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see beyond words to intentions. Whatever she found there appeared to satisfy her, because she nodded once, decisively, then leaned against his side in a gesture of trust that meant more than any verbal affirmation could have. They sat in companionable silence, watching the asteroids until Lyra found them nearly an hour later, her worried expression melting into something softer at the sight of them together. "There you are," she said, echoing Kalen's earlier greeting. "I was beginning to think you'd both disappeared." Alara signed quickly to her, explaining their conversation. "Home," Lyra repeated, her gaze meeting Kalen's over Alara's head. "Yes, I think it is." The moment of peace was interrupted by a gentle, alert tone from Kalen's communication device. A priority message from Haven's command center. "Ramirez wants to see us," he reported after checking the message. "All three of us." Something about intelligence developments regarding OmniCorp's Nexus launch. The comfortable domestic atmosphere shifted immediately to focused alertness. They made their way to the command center, where Commander Ramirez and Dr. Chun waited with expressions that telegraphed significant news. "We've intercepted communication indicating OmniCorp is proceeding with the Nexus launch despite the absence of their key," Ramirez explained without preamble. "They've developed an alternative access protocol, less elegant than what Alara could provide, but functional." "That's unexpected," Lyra said, professional interest mingling with concern. "The integration protocols were designed to be irreplaceable. That was the entire point of the project. They've made compromises," Dr. Chen elaborated. "Based on our analysis, the alternative protocol requires multiple access points rather than a single key. Less efficient, more vulnerable to disruption, but still dangerous in its potential reach." "When?" Kalen asked, cutting to the tactical heart of the matter. 72 hours, Ramirez replied grimly. "Once activated, the network will establish control links to every OmniCorp facility, vessel, and operation across the system, including dormant protocols in supposedly independent systems that have used their technology." The implications were staggering, a level of corporate control that went beyond economic dominance into something approaching governance. "What's our response?" Kalen asked, automatically including himself in Haven's strategic planning. Ramirez activated a holographic display showing what appear to be attack vectors on multiple OmniCorp facilities. "We've prepared disruption operations against key network nodes. Simultaneous strikes to prevent the system from achieving full activation. Conventional attacks won't be sufficient," Dr. Chen cautioned. "The network is designed with redundancies specifically to protect against physical sabotage, which is where our alternative comes in," Ramirez continued, shifting the display to show a complex data construct. "A targeted virus designed to corrupt the initialization protocols without destroying the infrastructure itself. A virus they'll be scanning for," Kalen pointed out, his security experience identifying the obvious flaw. "Yes," Ramirez acknowledged. "Unless it's delivered by someone they aren't watching for. Someone with unique access capabilities." All eyes turned to Alara, who had been following the conversation with solemn attention. "No," Lyra said immediately, stepping protectively in front of her daughter. "Absolutely not. She's not a weapon to be deployed." "Of course not," Dr. Chen agreed quickly. "But her abilities, combined with the modifications you've made to her integration, create a unique opportunity. She wouldn't need to physically access their systems or even connect directly. Just open a door briefly from a safe distance. While we create a very visible distraction elsewhere, Ramirez added. Omnicorp would focus on the apparent attack, never realizing the real threat came from a completely different vector. Kalen studied the plan displayed before them, his tactical mind assessing risks and contingencies. It was clever, potentially effective, but it placed Alara at the center of a dangerous operation. "What's the risk to her?" he asked directly, the question that mattered most. Dr. Chun hesitated, glancing at Lyra. There would be some neural strain from establishing the connection, even briefly, but nothing like what she experienced before the modifications. "We've designed the virus to require minimal interaction, just enough to bypass the initial security protocols, then it operates independently." Before the adults could continue debating, Alara stepped forward and signed deliberately to Lyra, her expression resolute. "She says she wants to help?" Lyra translated reluctantly. "That she understands what they want to do." Alara continued signing, her gestures becoming more emphatic. She says the Nexus is partly hers, even if they changed it. She helped build it without choosing to. Now she wants to choose how it's used." Lyra's voice caught as she translated. She wants to make her own decision about her abilities, not have others decide for her. Again, the room fell silent as the adults absorbed the wisdom and determination in the child's statement. It was Kalen who finally spoke, addressing Alara directly with the respect her declaration deserved. "It's your choice," he acknowledged. "But before you decide, I need you to understand something important." He knelt to her level, ensuring her full attention. "Your value isn't in what you can do. Not to us. If you choose not to help, if you decide this isn't your fight, that doesn't change anything about your place here. With us. Understand?" Alara nodded solemnly, then signed again directly to him. "I know," Kalen translated, having learned this particular phrase well. "But I want to help. I can help." The operation was planned with meticulous attention to detail over the next 48 hours. Ramirez coordinated the diversionary attacks, precision strikes against 3 Omnicorp communication relays that would draw security resources away from the main Nexus control center. Meanwhile, Dr. Chun and Lyra fine-tuned the virus and prepared Alara for her role. Kalen, drawing on his extensive experience with corporate security systems, identified the optimal moment and access point for Alara's intervention. A secondary monitoring station that connected to the main network but maintained less rigorous security protocols. "The station is located on Europa," he explained during the final briefing. "Ironic, given that's where Lyra and Alara were hiding before Omnicorp found them. It's primarily an automated monitoring facility, minimal personnel, but it has direct access to the Nexus initialization sequence for the outer system operations. We've confirmed the connection pathways," Dr. Chen added. "Alara won't need to establish a deep link, just enough to introduce the virus to the monitoring station systems. From there, it will propagate through existing network connections to the main Nexus control center." The plan required Alara to be within reasonable proximity to the monitoring station, close enough for her unique abilities to establish connection, but far enough to maintain safety and deniability. The Nemesis will position itself within a surveillance blind spot created by Europa's radiation patterns, Ramirez explained. "We'll maintain that position only long enough for Alara to establish connection and confirm virus deployment, then withdraw immediately. Total exposure time, less than 30 minutes. Throughout the briefings, Alara remained focused and determined, asking questions through her signs and absorbing information with remarkable comprehension. Kalen, watching her prepare, felt an uncomfortable mixture of pride and concern. Respect for her courage tempered by the persistent fear that they were asking too much of a child who had already endured more than most adults. The night before the operation, he found Lyra in the laboratory, running final simulations on the virus deployment. She should be resting, he observed, knowing Alara had been working alongside her mother for hours. I sent her to bed an hour ago, Lyra replied, not looking up from her work. These final calibrations need to be perfect. Kalen studied her tense posture, recognizing the signs of stress she was trying to conceal. You don't have to do this alone, you know. The entire team is behind this operation. It's not the same, Lyra said, finally meeting his gaze. They see the strategic value, the opportunity to counter Omnicorp's control. But for me, her voice caught. For me, it's my daughter walking back into danger after everything I've done to protect her. She's not walking in alone, Kaylin reminded her gently. And she's stronger than either of us realized. Maybe stronger than she should have to be, but that's the reality. Lyra sighed, setting aside her work with deliberate care. I know, and I know this is her choice. That's what makes it so difficult. Respecting her decision when every instinct tells me to shield her. That's what makes you a good mother, Kaylin said simply, and why she trusts you enough to make this choice. The moment of shared understanding between them had been building gradually over the weeks since their arrival at Haven. From desperate allies to cautious co-guardians to something deeper, a connection founded on mutual respect and their shared commitment to Alara's well-being. We should both get some rest, Lyra suggested, though she made no move to leave the laboratory. Tomorrow will require everyone at their best. Kaylin nodded, but instead of leaving, he pulled up a chair beside her. I'll help you finish the calibrations. Then we'll rest. The Nemesis departed Haven precisely on schedule, its advanced stealth systems activating as soon as they cleared the asteroid field. The journey to Europa was made in tense silence. Each member of the small team focused on their specific responsibilities. Alara spent much of the journey in quiet meditation, a technique Dr. Chun had taught her to prepare her mind for the control connection she would need to establish. Kaylin remained nearby, a reassuring presence without being intrusive, respecting her preparation process while ensuring she knew she wasn't alone. As they approached Europa, Commander Ramirez coordinated with the diversionary teams. Strikes will commence at exactly 0700 hours. That gives us 15 minutes in position before Omnicorp's attention is divided. The Nemesis slipped into the surveillance blind spot with practiced precision, positioning itself within Alara's range of the monitoring station but outside standard detection parameters. We're in position, Ramirez confirmed. All systems nominal. Stealth protocols holding. In the ship's specialized communication chamber, Alara sat in a modified interface chair, surrounded by equipment designed to amplify her connection while monitoring her neural activity. Lyra made final adjustments to the settings, her movements efficient despite her evident concern. Remember, she told Alara gently, maintain only peripheral connection. Don't try to go deeper into their systems than necessary. The virus is designed to propagate independently once inserted. Alara nodded, her expression focused and determined beyond her years. She signed briefly to her mother. I'll be careful, Lyra translated, managing a smile despite her worry. I know you will. Kaylin took position near the chamber's entrance, coordinating security updates with the bridge crew while maintaining visual contact with Alara. His role in the direct operation was minimal. Alara's abilities and the specialized equipment would do what his skills could not, but his presence provided both tactical assessment and emotional support. Diversionary strikes commencing, Ramirez's voice announced over the communication system. Omnicorp security networks responding. Monitoring station on Europa showing reduced alert status as personnel are diverted to primary incidents. Now, Alara, Dr. Chun instructed calmly, establish preliminary connection, just as we practiced. Alara closed her eyes, her small hands resting lightly on the interface panels designed specifically for her. For a moment, nothing appeared to happen. Then, the monitoring equipment registered the first contact, a gentle probe rather than the forceful integration Omnicorp had designed her for. Connection established, Dr. Chun confirmed, watching the readings carefully. Minimal security response from the target system. They're not detecting her unique signature. Lyra monitored Alara's neural patterns with intense focus. Neural stress within acceptable parameters. She's maintaining control. The virus deployment was designed to be sequential. First establishing a secure connection pathway, then transferring the specially coded program, then withdrawing while the virus integrated itself with the target system's standard operations. First phase complete, Dr. Chen reported. Secure pathway established. Beginning virus transfer. Alera's expression tightened slightly, the only outward sign of the concentration required to maintain the delicate balance between connection and concealment. On the monitors, her neural activity showed increased but still managed stress levels. Transfer at 30%, Chun continued, maintaining optimal data flow. No detection alerts from target system. Kalen, watching both the technical readouts and Alera herself, noticed a subtle shift in the monitoring station's automated response patterns. There's an adaptive protocol activating, he warned. It's starting to analyze the connection. Expected behavior, Chen assured him. The virus includes a masking component that presents the connection as routine system maintenance. Transfer at 60%. As the operation progressed, Alera's composure began to show small signs of strain, a slight tremor in her hands, a furrowing of her brow. Lyra adjusted the support systems, providing additional neural buffering to reduce the pressure. Transfer at 85%, Chen reported. Almost there. Suddenly, Alera's eyes flew open, her expression alarmed. She signed rapidly to Lyra, her movements urgent. Someone's there, Lyra translated, immediately concerned. A presence in the system that wasn't supposed to be there. Someone monitoring manually. Security officer? Kalen asked sharply, moving closer to the control panels. Alera shook her head emphatically, signing again. Not security, Lyra clarified. Something familiar. A neural pattern she recognizes. Understanding dawned on Kalen with chilling clarity. Voss. It has to be. He's implemented his own version of integration technology. Transfer at 92%, Chen reported tensely. We can't abort now without leaving evidence of the intrusion. Alera signed again, her determination evident despite her growing distress. She says she can complete it, Lyra translated. But the presence is becoming aware of her, searching for the source of the connection. Omnicorp vessels changing course. Ramirez's voice cut in over the communication system. 2 security cruisers breaking off from the diversionary sites, heading toward Europa's sector. They've detected us, Kalen concluded grimly. Or at least suspect something. How much longer? Transfer. At 98%, Chen replied. Seconds only. Alera's concentration was absolute now, her entire being focused on completing the transfer while evading the searching presence of Voss's consciousness within the system. The strain was evident in her neural readings, approaching the warning thresholds they had established. Complete, Chun announced finally. Virus deployed and integration confirmed. Disconnection sequence initiated. Alera's hands lifted from the interface panels, her connection severing with deliberate control rather than abrupt withdrawal. She slumped slightly in the chair, exhaustion evident but consciousness maintained. Get us out of here, Kalen ordered immediately, moving to Alera's side to check her condition. Executing emergency departure protocols, Ramirez confirmed. Stealth systems at maximum. Course set for secondary rendezvous point rather than direct return to Haven. As the Nemesis accelerated away from Europa, Lyra carefully disconnected Alera from the monitoring equipment, her movements gentle but efficient. The child was pale but alert, her eyes finding Kalen's with a question he understood without translation. Yes, you did it, he assured her. The virus is deployed. You were incredible. Alera smiled tiredly, then signed a brief question that Kalen had learned well enough to understand directly. Home now, he translated. Soon, he promised. A slight detour first, to make sure we're not followed. Then home. The operation had succeeded, but Kalen's tactical mind was already assessing the new complications. Voss's presence in the system, utilizing some form of integration technology, added a dangerous variable they hadn't anticipated. And the rapid response of Omnicorp security vessels suggested their diversionary tactics hadn't been as effective as hoped. Status update, he requested, connecting to the bridge while Lyra continued to monitor Alera's recovery. No direct pursuit detected, Ramirez reported. Omnicorp vessels are conducting a search pattern centered on Europa, but they don't appear to have tracked our departure vector. We're maintaining stealth protocols as a precaution. And the virus? Kalen asked the crucial question. Initial telemetry indicates successful integration with the target system. Chen replied, reviewing data from a separate monitoring station. It's propagating through the network connections as designed. We'll know within hours if it successfully disrupts the Nexus initialization. Alara, despite her exhaustion, was signing a question to Lyra, her expression concerned. She's asking about the presence she felt. Lyra explained to Kalen. She's certain it was Voss, but different, enhanced. He's been experimenting with his own version of the integration technology, Kalen surmised, probably using himself as the test subject since he lost access to Alara. That would explain how he stayed one step behind us despite our precautions. A dangerous development, Dr. Chun observed, joining them in the communication chamber. If he's achieved even partial integration, his abilities could be significant. Different from Alara's, perhaps, but potentially as powerful in their own way. The implications were troubling, but the immediate concern remained Alara's well-being. She had pushed her abilities further than since the neural modifications, and though the strain appeared manageable, the long-term effects were still uncertain. She needs rest, Lyra decided, helping Alara from the chair. Real rest, without monitoring equipment or debriefings. Of course, Chen agreed immediately. We've achieved our objective. Everything else can wait. They settled Alara in a small but comfortable cabin aboard the Nemesis, designed for personnel requiring medical recovery. Lyra remained with her, monitoring her condition with both professional expertise and maternal concern. Kalen returned to the bridge, joining Ramirez in tracking both their route back to Haven and the emerging reports from Omnicorp facilities across the system. The first signs of the virus's effect were beginning to appear: subtle disruptions in communication protocols, unexpected security lockdowns, initialization sequences failing verification. It's working, Ramirez confirmed, reviewing the incoming data. The Nexus network is experiencing cascading failures in precisely the patterns we anticipated. They'll eventually isolate and remove the virus, but not before it's thoroughly disrupted the launch sequence. They'll have to rebuild significant portions of the initialization protocols from scratch. Buying us time, Kalen concluded, but not a permanent solution. No, Ramirez agreed. But time is what we needed. Our technical teams are already developing countermeasures based on what we've learned about the network architecture. And with Omnicorp's credibility damaged by a failed launch of their showcase project, their corporate partners are becoming more receptive to alternative alliances. The strategic implications were significant, but Kalen found his thoughts returning to the cabin where Alara and Lyra rested. The victory felt hollow if it came at the expense of the child's well-being or her chance at something approaching a normal life. She did what none of our other operatives could have accomplished, Ramirez said, noting his distraction. You should be proud. I am, Kalen acknowledged. But she's a child, not an operative. She deserves more than being valued for her abilities. Ramirez considered this, then nodded with unexpected understanding. You're right. And when we return to Haven, that will be the priority, ensuring she has the childhood she deserves, with all the protection we can provide. The journey back to Haven was indirect but uneventful, Ramirez taking extra precautions to ensure they weren't tracked. Alara recovered quickly, her resilience once again manifesting in a swift return to alertness and curiosity. By the time they approached the hidden base, she was moving about the Nemesis with her usual observation skills, watching the crew's operations with interest. Their return to Haven was marked by subdued celebration, acknowledgement of the operation's success tempered by awareness that it represented just one battle in an ongoing conflict. The virus had successfully disrupted Omnicorp's Nexus launch, forcing a significant delay and exposing vulnerabilities in their system architecture that the Alliance's technical teams were already exploiting. In the weeks that followed, life at Haven settled into a new rhythm. Lyra continued her research, working with Dr. Chun to better understand both Alara's unique integration and the variant Voss had apparently developed. Their findings would be crucial in developing long-term countermeasures against both Omnicorp's technological dominance and Voss's unpredictable new capabilities. Kalen found himself increasingly involved in Haven security operations, his experience with corporate tactics proving valuable as the Alliance expanded its influence. But he was careful to balance these responsibilities with time spent with Alara and Lyra, honoring the commitment they had formed during their desperate journey across the sector. For Alara herself, the gradual normalization of life at Haven brought new discoveries and challenges. Her integration into the learning center continued, her unique communication style becoming less of a barrier as both she and the other children adapted. She made her first friend, a girl named Talia, whose parents had escaped a corporate mining colony after exposing dangerous working conditions. Talia's acceptance of Alara's differences without fear or excessive curiosity proved a powerful catalyst for the child's social development. 3 months after the Nexus operation, Kalen found Alara and Talia in one of Haven's hydroponics gardens, carefully tending seedlings under the supervision of the agricultural specialist. The sight of Alara engaged in such an ordinary, life-affirming activity struck him powerfully, a reminder of why their struggle against corporate domination mattered beyond abstract principles of freedom. "She is quite the green thumb," the specialist commented, noticing Kalen's arrival. "Natural intuition for what the plants need." Alara looked up at his approach, her face lighting with the smile that had become increasingly frequent. She signed a greeting, then eagerly showed him the seedling she had been tending, a small herb plant with delicate leaves. Lavender, Kalen identified, recognizing the distinctive shape. "Good choice," Alara signed again, explaining something about the plant's properties that he couldn't fully follow, her hands moving too quickly in her enthusiasm. "She says it helps people sleep and stay calm." Talia translated casually, comfortable with her friend's communication style. "She's growing it for her mom because she works too hard." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Kalen deeply. Despite everything she had endured, Alara's capacity for empathy and care remained intact, perhaps even strengthened by her experiences. "I think your mom will love it," he told her sincerely. "And you're right, she could use something to help her relax occasionally." Alara beamed at his approval, then returned to her careful work with the seedlings, explaining something to Talia through her signs as they continued their project. That evening, Kalen joined Lyra in their shared living quarters after Alara had gone to bed. The domestic arrangement had evolved naturally over the months at Haven, beginning as practical cooperation in caring for Alara and gradually deepening into something more personal, more permanent. "She's growing lavender for you," he mentioned, accepting the cup of tea Lyra offered. "To help you sleep better." Lyra smiled, touched by the revelation. "She notices everything. Sometimes I forget how perceptive she is beyond just her technological sensitivity." "It's who she is," Kalen observed, "not what was done to her. I think that's becoming clearer every day." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the quiet punctuated only by the subtle environmental sounds of Haven's life support systems. "Commander Ramirez approached me today," Lyra finally said, her tone carefully neutral, "about a new research initiative." "Oh," Kalen prompted, recognizing her hesitation. "They've identified a potential application of the integration technology, a modified version that could provide enhanced communication for deep space exploratory missions. Completely voluntary participation, minimal neural impact, nothing like what Omnicorp designed. And they want your expertise," Kalen concluded, understanding the implication. Lyra nodded. "They're establishing a dedicated facility on an outer colony. 6 months minimum commitment." She paused, watching his reaction. "I told them I needed to discuss it with my family first." The simple acknowledgement of what they had become, a family, bound not by genetics or legal formalities, but by choice and shared experience, resonated deeply. "What do you think?" she asked when he remained silent. Kalen considered carefully, balancing multiple factors. "The research sounds valuable, important even, but is it worth uprooting Alara just as she's finding stability?" "That's my concern too," Lyra admitted. "She's finally developing friendships, routines, a sense of normalcy. I'm not sure I want to disrupt that. She hesitated, then added more personally. And there's us. What we've built here. The acknowledgement of their relationship, still evolving, still finding its boundaries, but undeniably significant, hung between them. There might be a compromise, Kalen suggested after a moment's thought. If the research is valuable enough to the Alliance, perhaps they could establish a preliminary phase here at Haven, core concept development, before committing to the full off-site facility. Lyra considered this, her expression brightening. That might actually work. The initial theoretical models and simulation testing could certainly be done from here. She smiled, reaching for his hand. Thank you for understanding what matters most. Family first, Kalen said simply. The rest follows from that. The compromise proved acceptable to Commander Ramirez and the Alliance leadership. Lyra began the preliminary research while remaining at Haven, collaborating remotely with the specialized team assembling at the Outer Colony facility. The arrangement allowed her to maintain both her professional contributions and her presence in Alara's daily life, a balance that benefited all of them. Life settled into patterns that would have seemed impossible during their desperate flight across the sector. Alara continued to thrive in the Learning Center, her unique abilities integrated into her education rather than defining it. Her communication expanded beyond sign language to include written expression and even occasional spoken words. Rare and carefully chosen, but progress nonetheless. Kalen found unexpected fulfillment in his role within Haven security operations, his skills directed toward protection rather than the corporate enforcement that had once driven him to abandon his former life. The transition from lone salvager to community defender, from reluctant guardian to committed family member, had transformed him in ways he was still discovering. Yet beneath the hard-won domestic tranquility, they remained vigilant. OmniCorp's Nexus network had been delayed, but not defeated. Voss's experimentation with integration technology represented an unpredictable threat, and their unique family unit, particularly Alara with her irreplaceable abilities, would always be a potential target. 6 months after the Nexus operation, their vigilance proved justified. Haven's long-range sensors detected an OmniCorp exploratory vessel approaching the outer edges of the asteroid field that concealed the base. Its trajectory suggested systematic search patterns rather than chance encounter. They haven't found us yet, Ramirez clarified during the emergency briefing, but they're getting closer to identifying our location than any corporate vessel has before. How? Kalen asked the crucial question. Our stealth measures and disinformation protocols have kept them searching the wrong sectors for months. Ramirez's expression darkened. We believe they're being guided. The vessel's command logs identified Dr. Hadrian Voss as special scientific advisor for the mission. The implication was clear and troubling. Voss's integration abilities, however different from Alara's, might allow him to sense technological patterns or energy signatures that standard corporate sensors would miss. What's our response? Lyra asked, the protective determination that had driven her across the sector once, again evident in her voice. Haven has contingency protocols for discovery threats, Ramirez explained. We're implementing controlled shutdown of non-essential systems to minimize our energy signature. Defense platforms are on standby, but engagement would confirm our location. Evacuation? Kalen asked, his tactical mind already calculating escape routes and rendezvous points. Preliminary preparations only, Ramirez replied. Essential personnel and sensitive research are being staged for potential rapid departure, but full evacuation would be detectable and risks exposing our backup locations. The delicate balance required careful management, reducing Haven's detectable presence without creating the sudden energy signature changes that would confirm suspicions. For 3 tense days, the base operated in this reduced capacity, all residents adapting to conservation measures while maintaining essential functions. Alara, sensitive to both the technological adjustments and the heightened emotional atmosphere, responded with remarkable composure. She continued her regular activities at the Learning Center, though she asked more questions than usual through her signs, seeking to understand the situation rather than being protected from it. She knows something's happening, Lyra observed as they prepared for bed on the third night of the alert. She deserves to understand what we might be facing. Kaelin nodded in agreement. Better to prepare her than shelter her from reality. She's proven she can handle difficult truths. They explained the situation to Alara the next morning, balancing honesty with reassurance. Her response was characteristically thoughtful, concern mixed with determined resilience. She signed a series of questions about Haven's defenses, about Omnicorp's capabilities, about Voss's potential abilities. She's thinking strategically. Kaelin noted with a mixture of pride and sadness that a child her age should need such skills. Already analyzing the situation from multiple angles. Alara signed again, a question that caught both adults by surprise. She's asking if she could help, Lyra translated. If her abilities might be useful in confusing Voss's detection methods. The possibility hadn't occurred to them. Using Alara's unique connection to technology not as an offensive tool, but as a countermeasure against Voss's integration-enhanced search. It might be possible, Kaelin acknowledged cautiously. But the risk of exposure would be significant. If Voss can detect her connection attempt. Alara signed again, more emphatically. She says he already knows she's somewhere in this sector, Lyra translated. But not exactly where. She thinks she could create false echoes, technical mirages that would lead him away from Haven. The concept was innovative and potentially effective. Using Alara's more refined integration to establish brief, distant connections finding Denari proved easier than expected. A workshop with her name prominently displayed on a weathered sign. The space was filled with an eclectic collection of mechanical parts, electronic components, and half-completed repair projects. The woman herself matched her workspace, unconventional and slightly chaotic. Her dark hair was styled in elaborate braids interwoven with copper wire, and her coveralls were customized with circuit patterns that occasionally pulsed with subtle light. Closed for inventory, she called without looking up from the complex device she was calibrating. Captain Maddox sent us, Kaelin replied, as a courtesy to Faulkner. Those words produced an immediate change. Denari set down her tools and activated something on her workbench that emitted a low hum. A signal jammer, Kaelin realized, designed to prevent surveillance. Maddox doesn't extend courtesies lightly, Denari said, finally looking at them with shrewd assessment. Her gaze lingered on Alara, especially not for families. We need passage to Haven, Lyra said directly, eliminating any pretense. Denari's eyebrows rose slightly. Haven doesn't exist on any official charts. We know, Kaelin confirmed. We also know it's where we need to be. The technician studied them for another long moment, then nodded once. Wait here. She disappeared into a back room, leaving them standing amid the organized chaos of her workshop. Alara immediately showed interest in the various devices, her hands signing rapid questions about their functions. Not now, little one, Lyra murmured. We need to be ready to move. Denari returned minutes later, her expression more serious. Transport can be arranged, but there's a complication. Omnicorp security teams arrived at the outpost 6 hours ago. They're conducting routine inspections of all departing vessels. Kaelin swore under his breath. They're closing the net. How do they track us here so quickly? They might not have, Denari suggested. Proxima is a logical waypoint for anyone heading to the Rim. They could be covering all possible routes. Either way, we need alternatives, Lyra said, instinctively drawing Alara closer. Denari nodded, already thinking ahead. There's a supply run leaving for the mining operation at Ceres Deep in 2 hours. From there, you can connect with the Haven shuttle. It's not direct, but it avoids the main departure channels where Omnicorp is focusing its efforts. Ceres Deep is in the opposite direction from Haven, Kaelin noted, familiar with the sector's geography. Exactly why they won't be watching it as closely, Denari confirmed. The mining operation is officially independent, but maintains good relations with Omnicorp for safety reasons. Your credentials will need to be solid. She produced a small device and connected it to the identification chips the administrator had provided them. These were good work, but basic. I'll upgrade them to withstand deeper scanning. As Denari worked on their credentials, Alara tugged at Kalen's sleeve, her expression concerned. She signed something urgent. "What is it?" he asked, looking to Lyra for translation. "She says there's someone watching the workshop," Lyra explained, instantly alert. "Someone familiar." Kalen moved cautiously to the window, positioning himself to see out without being obvious. The pedestrian corridor outside was moderately busy with maintenance staff and cargo handlers moving between assignments. "I don't see anyone suspicious," he said, but trusted Alara's instincts enough to keep watching. Then he spotted him, a man in nondescript technician's clothing, his attention seemingly focused on a handheld device. But his posture was wrong for a maintenance worker, too alert, too controlled. And there was something familiar about his profile. One of Voss's assistants, Kalen realized with a cold certainty. The one who came with him to the outpost. "How did he find us?" Lyra asked, tension evident in her voice. "Doesn't matter," Denari interjected, quickly finishing her work on their credentials. "What matters is getting you out before he calls for backup. There's a service corridor through the back of the workshop. It connects to the lower docking levels." She handed them the enhanced ID chips and a small data key. "This will get you aboard the supply vessel to Ceres Deep. Ask for Tamir, he's the pilot. Tell him you're part of Denari's salvage acquisition team." "What about you?" Lyra asked. "Won't you be implicated when they realize we were here?" Denari smiled thinly. "I handle special logistics for half the station. Plausible deniability is my specialty." Kalen checked his weapon, ensuring it was accessible but concealed. "We appreciate the risk you're taking. Just get that child somewhere safe," Denari replied, her gaze lingering on Alara with unexpected softness. "The Corps have taken enough from all of us." They slipped through the back exit, entering a narrow service corridor illuminated by intermittent emergency lighting. Denari had provided basic directions to the lower docking levels, but the station's labyrinthine layout made navigation challenging. Alara, however, seemed to have an instinctive understanding of their path. At each junction, she would pause briefly, then confidently indicate a direction. Kalen and Lyra followed her lead, trusting her unique perception. "She's sensing the station's systems," Lyra explained quietly as they hurried through the corridors. "Finding the pathways with least resistance, both physically and electronically." "Useful talent," Kalen acknowledged, maintaining vigilant awareness of their surroundings. They reached the lower docking levels without encountering security, but Kalen's tactical instincts were screaming warnings. It had been too easy. In his experience, that meant either extraordinary luck or a trap waiting to be sprung. The supply vessel was exactly where Denari had indicated, a sturdy, unremarkable cargo ship with Ceres Mining Cooperative emblazoned on its hull. The loading area was busy with cargo handlers and automated loaders, providing useful cover as they approached. Kalen spotted the pilot, a tall man with a distinctive scar running along his jawline, supervising the final cargo checks. "That must be Tamir. Wait here while I make contact." He approached casually, projecting the confident demeanor of someone who belonged. "Tamir? Denari sent us. Said we're part of the salvage acquisition team for this run." The pilot eyed him warily, then noticed the data key Kalen held. Denari's getting ambitious, sending 3 for a standard pickup. His gaze shifted to where Lyra and Alara waited, especially with a kid. "Training opportunity," Kalen improvised smoothly. "Plus, the outpost getting hot. Omnicorp inspections increasing. You know how it goes." Tamir considered this, then nodded. "Cabin space is limited. You'll have to share the auxiliary quarters." He took the data key, checking its authorization. "Departure in 20 minutes. Board now if you want to avoid the final inspection sweep." Kalen signaled to Lyra and Alara, and they moved toward the vessel's boarding ramp. They were halfway up when the disruption began. Raised voices, then the distinctive sound of security personnel identifying themselves at the far end of the docking area. "Move," Kalen urged, no longer concerned about appearing casual. "Now." They rushed aboard, Tamir following close behind. The pilot immediately sealed the airlock, his expression grim. "Friends of yours?" he asked sardonically, nodding toward the viewport where Omnicorp security forces were now visible, moving purposefully through the docking area. Not exactly, Kalen replied. How quickly can we depart? Tamir assessed the situation with the rapid calculation of someone accustomed to operating in gray areas. Final clearance isn't for 15 minutes. Leaving early will raise flags. Staying will raise more, Lyra pointed out. The pilot made his decision. Get to your quarters. I'll handle departure. And if this brings heat on Denari or me, there'll be consequences. They hurried to the small cabin Tamir had indicated, a space designed for 2 crew members at most, with basic accommodations and minimal privacy. Through the cabin's small viewport, they could see the Omnicorp security team questioning cargo handlers, showing images that were almost certainly of them. They're going to check every vessel, Lyra said tensely. Then we need to not be here when they do, Kalen replied, already assessing the cabin for hiding places. The environmental maintenance access, he decided, indicating a panel near the floor. It connects to the ship's central duct system. He removed the panel, revealing a narrow crawl space designed for maintenance drones and emergency access. Alara first, then you, Lyra. I'll replace the panel from inside. Alara hesitated, signing a question to Lyra. She's asking if it's safe, Lyra translated. The machinery in there. She can sense it. Kalen understood her concern. For someone with her unique sensitivity to technology, being surrounded by the ship's systems might be overwhelming, especially in her modified but still adjusting state. He knelt to her level, meeting her eyes directly. It won't be comfortable, he acknowledged honestly, but I'll be right there with you. We just need to hide until the ship leaves the station. Can you be brave for a little while? Alara studied him with those solemn eyes that seemed to see more than they should, then nodded resolutely. She signed something brief to Lyra. She says she trusts you, Lyra translated, her voice catching slightly. The statement hit Kalen with unexpected force. The weight of that trust, so freely given despite all she had endured at the hands of adults who should have protected her. I won't let you down, he promised, helping her into the access tunnel. The maintenance crawl space was cramped and uncomfortably warm, filled with the hum of the ship's environmental systems. They positioned themselves as far from the access point as possible while still maintaining a clear route back to the cabin. Now we wait, Kalen whispered, keeping Alara between himself and Lyra in the narrow space. The minutes crawled by with excruciating slowness. They could hear distant voices, crew members moving about the ship, the occasional muffled announcement over the communication system. Then, alarmingly, the sound of their cabin door opening. Security sweep, an authoritative voice announced. Standard procedure before departure. They remained absolutely still as footsteps moved around the small cabin. Alara tensed, and Kalen placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, silently urging calm. Clear, the voice finally declared, and the door closed again. Moments later, they felt the subtle vibration of engines engaging. The ship was preparing for departure. Kalen released a carefully controlled breath, allowing himself the first hint of relief. The departure sequence proceeded without further incident. The cargo vessel disengaged from Proxima Outpost, its powerful engines propelling them away from the station and the immediate threat of Omnicorp security. When it seemed safe, they made their way back through the access tunnel to their cabin. Alara emerged first, visibly relieved to be out of the confined space with its overwhelming technological presence. We should stay out of sight as much as possible, Kalen advised. The fewer crew members who can identify us, the better. Lyra nodded in agreement, helping Alara settle on one of the narrow bunks. The child looked tired but resilient, her innate adaptability once again asserting itself in challenging circumstances. Their journey to Ceres deep past intense but uneventful hours. Tamir checked on them once, his manner professional but distant, clearly wishing to maintain plausible deniability about their true nature. We dock at Ceres in approximately 6 hours, he informed them. There's a secondary shuttle service that connects to various outposts in the sector. Best I can do. It's enough, Kalen assured him. We appreciate the risk you're taking. Tamir shrugged. Daenerys' vouching carries weight. Just make sure whatever trouble you're in doesn't follow back to us. As the pilot left, Elara signed something to Lyra, her expression thoughtful. She's asking how much further to Haven, Lyra translated. She's trying to calculate the remaining journey. That depends on the shuttle connections, Kaelin explained, addressing Elara directly, as he increasingly did. But my estimate is another day, maybe two. Elara considered this, then signed again, more elaborately this time. She wants to know if Omnicorp will ever stop looking for her, Lyra said, her voice softening with maternal concern. The question hung in the air, its implications echoing far beyond their immediate circumstances. It was the question that had driven their desperate flight across the sector. Not just how to escape, but whether true escape was even possible. Kaelin considered his response carefully, aware of the balance between honesty and hope that Elara needed. Corporations have long memories, he admitted, but they also have shifting priorities. Right now, you're valuable to them because of the Nexus Network launch. If that succeeds without you, or fails because of something else, their interest might eventually wane. And your neural modification will help, Lyra added, stroking Elara's hair gently. You're no longer the perfect key they designed. That makes you less valuable to them as a tool. Elara absorbed this, her expression serious beyond her years. Then she signed again, the gesture simpler but somehow more profound. What about as a person? Lyra translated, her voice catching. Am I valuable as a person? The question struck Kaelin to his core. The innocent yet devastating insight of a child who had been treated as an asset, an experiment, a key, but rarely as simply a human being worthy of inherent value and protection. He moved to sit beside her on the bunk, finding himself reaching for her small hand without conscious thought. More than you know, he said, the words emerging with a conviction that surprised even him. To us, and soon to others who will know you as just Elara, not what you can do. The child's solemn expression gave way to a small, precious smile. She signed something brief to Lyra. She says she'd like that. Lyra translated, tears gathering in her eyes. To be just Elara. The moment of connection was interrupted by a sudden lurch as the ship changed course abruptly. Emergency alerts activated throughout the vessel, and the acceleration compensators struggled to adjust, pressing them into their seats. Something's wrong, Kaelin said, immediately alert. Stay here. He moved cautiously to the cabin door, listening for indications of what had happened. The corridor outside was filled with the sound of crew members responding to the emergency, voices tense but controlled. Catching fragments of conversation, Kaelin pieced together the situation. They had received an emergency override order to change course and rendezvous with another vessel. The order carried corporate security authentication that the captain couldn't ignore without risking severe penalties. Omnicorps found us, he reported grimly, returning to Lyra and Elara. They've issued a mandatory rendezvous order. This vessel is too legitimate to refuse. How? Lyra asked, fear evident in her voice. How did they track us to this specific ship? Kaelin had been considering that very question. They must have had more people at Proxima than we realized. Maybe they spotted us boarding, or Voss's man reported our location. He paused, a darker possibility forming. Or there could be tracking technology we're not aware of. Lyra's eyes widened with sudden realization. She looked at Elara, who was watching them both with growing apprehension. The integration, Lyra said quietly, even modified, it might still emit a unique energy signature when she connects with systems, if they have specialized detection equipment. The implication was clear, Elara's very nature, the integration that was now an inseparable part of her being, might be what allowed Omnicorp to track them across the sector. How long until the rendezvous? Lyra asked, already gathering their few possessions. Based on our previous speed and the course change, I'd estimate 30 minutes, Kaelin replied, mind racing through possible escape options. We can't hide in the maintenance tunnels again. They'll conduct a thorough search this time. The escape pods? Lyra suggested. Kaelin shook his head. First thing they'll secure. And they're designed for emergency survival, not stealth. We'd be picked up immediately. Elara, who had been listening intently, suddenly signed something urgent to Lyra. She says there's another option, Lyra translated, watching Alara's hands carefully. Something about cargo modules? External attachment points. Understanding dawned on Kalen. The mining equipment pods. They're attached to the ship's exterior for transport to Ceres Deep, but they have minimal life support for emergency repair situations. Alara nodded vigorously, signing more details. She can sense them, Lyra explained. 3 pods attached to the ventral hull. One contains atmospheric equipment with an emergency oxygen reserve. It's risky, Kalen warned. Those pods aren't designed for extended occupancy, and separating from the ship would leave us floating in open space. Better than being captured, Lyra countered. And if Alara can activate the pod's locator beacon after Omnicorp leaves, we might be found by independent salvagers. The plan was desperate, but their options were rapidly diminishing. Kalen checked the corridor again. Crew members were still focused on the course change emergency, providing a window of opportunity. We'll need environment suits, he said, making the decision. The access to the cargo area should be minimally supervised during an all-hands alert. They moved quietly through the ship's corridors, taking advantage of the crew's distraction. The cargo deck was exactly as Kalen had hoped, staffed by only a single technician who was easily avoided. The environment suits they found were basic models designed for short-term external repairs, but they would provide essential protection. Helping Alara into hers was challenging. The smallest size was still too large, requiring creative adjustments to ensure proper sealing. The equipment pods are accessed through the external maintenance airlock, Kalen explained, checking their suit seals one final time. We'll need to move quickly once we're outside. The ship's sensors will detect the airlock activity. The maintenance airlock was a small chamber designed for repair crews to access the ship's exterior. Operating it manually to avoid triggering automatic alerts required Kalen's full concentration and Lyra's assistance. Once the outer door opened, they faced the daunting reality of their plan, the vast emptiness of space, with only the ship's hull beneath them and the distant stars above. The equipment pods were visible approximately 30 meters along the ventral surface. Stay connected to your tethers until we reach the pod, Kalen instructed, the suit communications system carrying his voice clearly despite its limited range. Move deliberately, not quickly. Rushing causes mistakes. They made their way carefully along the hull, magnetic boots providing tenuous but sufficient attachment to the surface. Alara moved between them, her smaller size actually proving advantageous in a zero-gravity environment. The equipment pod was exactly as Alara had sensed, a self-contained unit designed to transport atmosphere processing equipment to the mining operation. Its external access panel responded to standard emergency protocols, allowing them entry into a space barely large enough for the 3 of them among the densely packed machinery. Seal the hatch, Kalen directed once they were inside. We need to detach before the rendezvous. This was the most critical and dangerous part of their plan. The pod was designed to be released only upon arrival at the mining facility, with proper docking procedures and safety protocols. Detaching it manually mid-flight would trigger multiple alarms and could potentially damage both the pod and the ship. Lyra, can you identify the emergency release mechanism? Kalen asked, examining the pod's interior controls. Before she could respond, Alara moved to a maintenance panel, her small suited hand hovering over the interface. She looked at Kalen questioningly through her helmet visor. He understood immediately. Your connection. You can trigger the release without setting off the full alarm sequence. Alara nodded, her expression visible as a serious determination through the helmet's transparent front. Do it, Kalen decided. But carefully, we need the life support systems to remain operational. Alara placed her hand on the panel. Even through the suit's glove, her unique connection established itself. More controlled now after Lyra's modifications, but still remarkably effective. The panel illuminated with diagnostic information, displaying systems Kalen suspected were normally secured behind multiple authorization levels. With precise, deliberate movements, Alara navigated through the systems, isolating the pod's attachment mechanisms from the main alarm protocols. The process took several minutes of intense concentration, her small face showing the effort required to maintain the selective connection. Finally, she nodded once decisively, and a series of mechanical sounds vibrated through the pod, the attachment clamps releasing in. "Careful sequence. Brace yourselves," Kalen warned as the final connection separated. The sensation was subtle at first, a slight drift as the pod began moving away from the ship. Through the small viewport, they watched the cargo vessel grow smaller, continuing its course toward the rendezvous point while they floated free in the empty void. "It worked," Lyra breathed, relief evident in her voice. "We're clear. For now," Kalen cautioned, checking the pod systems. "Life support is functioning, but it's designed for temporary use. We have maybe 12 hours of breathable atmosphere before recycling efficiency drops to critical levels." "What about temperature regulation?" Lyra asked, practical even in their desperate circumstances. "Better news there. The equipment itself generates heat, and the pod's insulation is designed to maintain operating temperature for the machinery. We should be able to conserve suit power for communications and oxygen supplementation." Alara signed a question, her movements hampered but still clear in the bulky suit. "She's asking about rescue," Lyra translated. "How will anyone find us?" "The pod has an emergency beacon," Kalen explained, examining the control systems. "But we can't activate it until we're certain Omnicorp has left the area. Their sensors would detect it immediately." "And then what?" Lyra asked the question they were all considering. Who would respond to a mining equipment pod's distress call in this sector? Salvagers, independent traders, maybe even Ceres deep monitoring stations if we drift into their sensor range, Kalen replied. "It's not ideal, but it's better than certain capture." They settled in for an uncomfortable wait, conserving motion and energy in the confined space. Through the viewport, they occasionally glimpsed the distant flash of engine signatures as vessels moved through the sector, including, hours later, what appeared to be the cargo ship resuming its original course, presumably after the Omnicorp inspection had found no trace of them. "I think it's safe to activate the beacon," Kalen decided, having monitored the sensor readings as best he could with the pod's limited equipment. Alara, who had been remarkably calm throughout their ordeal, moved to the control panel again. With careful precision, she activated the emergency beacon, modulating its strength to balance between detection range and power consumption. The waiting that followed was perhaps the most difficult part of their journey so far. Adrift in the void, with limited resources and no certainty of rescue, they faced the stark reality of their situation. The pod's atmosphere gradually degraded, requiring them to supplement with their suit oxygen. Temperature remained stable, but the confines of the pod grew increasingly uncomfortable as hours passed. Alara, despite her resilience, eventually showed signs of stress. The combined effects of physical discomfort, the strain of using her abilities, and the psychological pressure of their circumstances. She drifted into fitful sleep in Lyra's arms, her small form curled protectively within the oversized environment suit. "She's incredible," Kalen observed quietly, watching the child sleep. "After everything she's been through, the strength she shows." "She's had to be strong," Lyra replied, her voice carrying both pride and sorrow. "She never had the luxury of a normal childhood." "She will," Kalen said with unexpected conviction. "If we reach Haven, if we find a way to neutralize the Omnicorp threat permanently, she deserves that chance." The conversation paused as the pod's communication system suddenly activated, a standard emergency response query on the universal distress frequency. "Unidentified pod. This is independent vessel Nemesis responding to emergency beacon. Please confirm status and occupancy." Kalen moved quickly to the communication panel, hope warring with caution. "This is cargo pod T7 from Ceres Mining Transport. 3 occupants, life support at 27% remaining capacity. Requesting immediate assistance." There was a brief pause before the response came. "Confirmed T7. Preparing for recovery." Stand by for grapple approach. Through the viewport, they spotted a vessel approaching, sleek, dark, with the distinctive profile of a high-performance scout ship rather than a typical salvage vessel. Kalen's tactical instincts immediately heightened to alert. "That's not a standard salvage ship," he murmured to Lyra, keeping his voice low despite the private communication channel. "Military design, heavily modified." "Omnicorp?" Lyra asked tensely. "No corporate markings," Kalen observed as the vessel came closer. "Independent, but professional. Could be bounty hunters or—" His thought remained unfinished as the vessel's grappling system engaged, securing the pod with practiced precision. The subsequent docking procedure was equally smooth, not the approach of opportunistic salvagers, but of a crew with specific recovery training. As pressure equalized between the pod and the vessel's airlock, they prepared for whatever awaited them, rescue or new threat. Kalen positioned himself to exit first, ready to protect Lyra and Alara if necessary. The pod's hatch opened to reveal a woman in a modified tactical suit, her posture alert but not overtly threatening. Behind her stood two crew members with similar bearing, disciplined, professional, but without the corporate uniformity of Omnicorp security. "Kalen Tarek," the woman said, recognition and something like satisfaction in her voice. "Lyra Devereaux. And of course the child. We've been looking for you." "Who's we?" Kalen demanded, tension evident in his stance. The woman smiled slightly. "My name is Commander Sonia Ramirez. I represent the coalition you've been trying to reach. What you call the Resistance. What we call the Free System Alliance." She stepped aside, gesturing toward the interior of the vessel. "Welcome to the Nemesis. You're safer than you've been in a very long time." The transition from desperate fugitives to guests aboard the Nemesis was surreal. The vessel was indeed military-grade, compact but efficient, with systems that Kalen recognized as cutting-edge or experimental. The crew, while not wearing uniforms, operated with the cohesion and precision of trained professionals. Commander Ramirez led them to a small but comfortable cabin where they could rest and recover. Medical staff checked them all, paying particular attention to Alara's unique physiology and the modifications Lyra had made to her neural integration. "How did you find us?" Lyra asked once their immediate needs had been addressed. "We were adrift in open space. We've been tracking Omnicorp's pursuit movements," Ramirez explained. "When they suddenly diverted a cargo vessel for inspection, then resumed course without any reported arrests or contraband seizure, we knew they'd lost you somewhere in the process. The emergency beacon simply confirmed our search area." "You've been watching us?" Kalen asked, professional suspicion mixing with grudging appreciation for their effectiveness. "Watching Omnicorp," Ramirez corrected. "Your escape from their facility with Alara registered on our intelligence network immediately. We've been monitoring the situation, waiting for an opportunity to make contact safely." "Why wait?" Lyra questioned. "If you knew we were trying to reach the Resistance." "Security protocols," Ramirez replied simply. "Omnicorp has infiltrated other Resistance cells before. We needed to be certain you weren't being used as unwitting bait for a trap." She looked at Alara with something approaching reverence. "And we needed to understand exactly what makes her so valuable to them." Alara, who had been quiet but attentive throughout the conversation, signed a question to Lyra. "She wanted to know if we're going to Haven now," Lyra translated. Ramirez smiled, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "Yes, little one. We're taking you to Haven. The Real Haven, not the outpost you were aiming for. Our primary base of operations." "And then?" Kalen asked, needing to understand their longer-term situation. "Then we work together to ensure Omnicorp can never use her as they intended," Ramirez said, her tone shifting to one of focused determination. "The Nexus network represents a level of corporate control that goes beyond profit into domination. We've been developing countermeasures, but Alara and your expertise, Dr. Devereaux, could be the key to ensuring it never achieves full operational status." The journey to Haven took less than a day aboard the Nemesis, its advanced propulsion system cutting through space with impressive efficiency. As they traveled, Commander Ramirez shared more details about the Free System Alliance, A coalition of scientists, former corporate employees, independent colonists, and others committed to preventing corporate hegemony from extinguishing personal freedom throughout the system. Haven itself proved to be more impressive than either Kalen or Lyra had anticipated. Hidden within an asteroid field that generated natural interference patterns, the base was a marvel of engineering and adaptive design. Part military installation, part research facility, part self-sustaining colony. As they docked in one of Haven's concealed bays, Ramirez turned to them with an expression of genuine welcome. For what it's worth, welcome home. Both of you have been through more than most could endure. And this child, she added, looking at Alara with respect rather than scientific interest, has carried a burden no child should bear. Alara, standing between Kalen and Lyra, looked out at their new surroundings with cautious hope. She signed something to Lyra, who translated with a tremulous smile. She says it feels different here. The systems, they're not trying to take from her. They're just existing alongside her. Our technology is designed with different principles, Ramirez explained. Collaborative rather than extractive. Your integration modifications helped, but our environmental adjustments should make her connection more comfortable, less draining. As they disembarked, they were greeted by a small reception committee, key personnel of the Alliance who had been briefed on their arrival. Among them was a face that made Lyra gasp in recognition. Marcus, a tall man with kind eyes and streaks of premature gray in his dark hair, stepped forward. It's been a long time, Lyra. When we heard you'd escaped with Alara, well, we never gave up hope of finding you. Dr. Marcus Chun, Ramirez explained for Kalen's benefit, one of our leading researchers on neural integration technology. He was part of the original project before OmniCorp's takeover. Dr. Chun knelt to Alara's level, his expression gentle. Hello, little one. Do you remember me? I was there when you were very small. Alara studied him carefully, then signed something to Lyra. She remembers your voice, Lyra translated, surprised. Reading to her. Chun smiled broadly. I used to read scientific journals aloud in the lab. Everyone thought I was eccentric, but I believed even at that early stage that your developing mind could absorb the concepts. He looked up at Lyra. I was right, wasn't I? More than you know, Lyra confirmed, her expression a mixture of professional respect and maternal pride. The welcome extended to a tour of the facilities that would become their new home. Living quarters more comfortable than anything they'd experienced since their flight began, research laboratories where Lyra could continue her work in safer conditions, and perhaps most importantly, a learning center where other children of the colony were educated. There are other children here? Lyra asked, watching Alara's reaction to this revelation. 17, currently, Ramirez confirmed. Ages 3 to 16. Children of our personnel, refugees from corporate exploitation, orphans of the resistance. A diverse group, but welcoming, and all aware, in age-appropriate ways, of our mission. Alara watched the distant figures of children playing in a designated recreation area, her expression a complex mixture of longing and apprehension. She signed a question to Lyra. She's asking if they'll be afraid of her. Lyra translated, her heart clearly breaking at the question. If they'll know she's different. Kalen, who had been observing more than participating in the tour, surprised himself by kneeling beside Alara. They might notice you're different, he told her honestly. But different isn't scary or bad. It's just different. And they're all different too, in their own ways. Alara considered this, then signed directly to him. A simple phrase he had come to recognize without translation. Together, he confirmed, the word feeling increasingly like a promise rather than just an acknowledgement. We'll figure it out together. The days that followed their arrival at Haven brought a gradual adjustment to their new reality. Lyra integrated quickly into the research team, working alongside Dr. Chun and others to better understand Alara's unique integration and develop technologies that could counter OmniCorp's Nexus network without requiring Alara's direct involvement. Kalen, whose skills and experience as a former corporate security specialist proved valuable to the Alliance's operations, found himself unexpectedly content with a role that utilized his abilities for protection rather than exploitation. He joined Haven's security team, helping to enhance their defenses and develop strategies against potential corporate incursions. Alara, perhaps most remarkably, began the challenging but rewarding process of integration into something resembling normal childhood. The Learning Center welcomed her, adapting to her unique communication style and abilities with the flexibility that came from hashtag. She handed him the child. "You saved me years ago, and left me with this." The rust-flecked shuttle groaned as Kalen guided it through the debris field of the Tartarus Belt. Chunks of broken asteroids and abandoned mining equipment floated in the void, silhouettes against the distant, weak light of a dying sun. His breath fogged the visor of his helmet as he checked the navigation coordinates again. The job was simple. Retrieve a positioning unit from a cargo vessel that had drifted deep into the hazard zone of the belt. Simple, but not without risk, like everything else in this godforsaken place. Just another day in paradise, Kalen muttered to himself, a habit formed after years of isolation. The Tartarus Belt had once been a bustling hub of corporate mining operations.